So Mike, maybe let me tell you a story that might drive this point home. You know, 1941 was not a good year in the Pacific. Japanese invasion, Pearl Harbor, all of that.
That since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed.
Robert Preston Taylor went to the Philippines in 1941. He got there and he'd been there a couple of months, and soon he found himself on the Bataan Death March. 65,000 Allied soldiers, prisoners of war, being marched to their prisoner of war camp. Many would fall by the wayside, get bayoneted. And yet Robert Preston Taylor was a real chaplain. He was a great friend to those, and he was helping, he was carrying people in every way. They got to the prisoner of war camp. Over half of them had died. And Robert Preston Taylor soon learned that guerrillas outside the wire had medicines, little ointments that would prevent these life-threatening tropical infections and diseases. He started going out, coming back in, giving it to his fellow prisoners. You can imagine how much they revered him for his selfless service. One night he was coming back in the wire and he got caught. And the Japanese threw him into a hell box. It was a pit in the jungle, maybe 4 by 4, and they put him in there and bamboo over the top as a covering. Every now and then he got drops of rainwater that came in. He was there for days and then weeks. Finally they took the top off. It was blinded by the light and so forth. And a couple of fellow prisoners lifted him out of this hole, and he was emaciated. He couldn't even stand up. And as some of the pastors that might be listening to this, or caregivers or chaplains, as is so typical, his fellow prisoners gathered around him and they said, "Chaplain, what's the good word?" And he said, "Oh, give me a break. I've been in the..." He didn't say that, but he was ready in season. He said, "Well, let me tell you what I learned, men. I learned that we should not doubt in the dark what we believed in the light. Do not doubt in the dark what we believe in the light." That is so important. So in the light of day, in the light of fair winds and following seas, in the light of times when we can set the right conditions, get the right reflexes, train ourselves to be ready and resilient, we should do that so that in the dark of doubt, despair, discouragement, woundedness, whatever the darkness is, we are able to cling back to what we knew to be true in the light. So relevant, so practical, words of wisdom from a person that went through the toughest that man can endure.